Danny's going to be speaking on surprising things about HCP social behavior, and there'll be a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So please join us in welcoming Danny as our next speaker this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I know it's low biorhythm time, so hopefully we can talk about HCPs together. There's a broad skepticism about the role of social media for HCPs, and I'm here to tell you that social media is becoming a workplace tool for most HCPs, and I want to show you some information that will make that case. But the first step, of course, is to kind of understand our target audience. And frankly, there's not a lot of joy in HCP land. There's a huge change of circumstances when you think about people becoming doctors, becoming physicians, and moving into the world of medicine. The idea that becoming a doctor used to be a social elevator, and you automatically jump to the upper middle class is no longer the case. The idea that in the old days, doctors were independent business people and entrepreneurs, and hospital systems have bought them up, and now they're employees. If you've been to the doctor recently, you know that your experience is the doctor looking over their shoulder at you while they hammer out the EHRs. So you have a variety of different things affecting this, and you can add to that the fact that reps have limited access to physicians. Also consider the generational change, that the baby boomers, guys my age, are leaving the scene and being replaced by Gen X and millennials who are digital natives and who expect to be serviced digitally and have the computer savvy that many of us have spent time trying to learn. And lastly, there's an incredible physician shortage. The last data I've seen is 150,000 PCPs short in the US, and that's before we start counting the specialties. So there's a shortage, so people are working harder, they're working longer, they're working under different kind of circumstances, and the payoff is not as great as they expected, and the payoff is not as great as their older brothers and sisters or their parents enjoyed. So we're talking to an audience that is skeptical of big pharma. We're talking to an audience that is digitally savvy. We're talking to an audience that wants the data. They don't want the spin. They don't want the story. They want the raw data. They want to make the decisions themselves. And all of this leads them in many ways to social media. Now, the information I'm about to share is based on a number of things. Number one, working with our clients. Number two, as Jim mentioned, Sermo does a lot of surveys. We've done a number of surveys with them, so some of the data you're going to see comes from those surveys. The latest data came from 206 physicians, split evenly among 10 specialties. We also took a look at some of the demographics and firmographics. Why? Because we know that younger female white physicians with a couple of years in practice think radically differently than 60-year-old surgeons who have had their own practice for 25 years. So understanding the demographics of the audience, understanding the changes, and also understanding that one size does not fit all, that physicians and certainly HCPs have different ideas, have different perspectives, and need to be serviced with content that is aimed at who they are, not some broad generalization of who HCPs might be. The key in understanding, however, is that 78% of HCPs surveyed use social media for clinical purposes. And let me say that again because it's kind of a radical idea. While many of these people are on Facebook for their personal desire, almost 8 out of 10 use the social media in their practice, in their clinical thing. And you need to think about this in a spectral kind of way. So on one hand, you're competing with UpToDate and Hippocrates in the moment. I'm going to whip out my phone, I'm going to dial Snapchat, I'm going to talk to a physician on the other side of the country, I'm going to get some information. The flip side, of course, is I'm going to spend 2 hours on Saturday afternoon during the rainstorm cruising Sermo, learning information that's being posted by a variety of different things, of voting on drugs, taking surveys. So somewhere all on that spectrum, you're going to find the 78% of HCPs who are committed to using social media as part and parcel of their professional lives. Now, what's really interesting is this idea that they come to social media and they trust strangers. The interesting part of this slide is the bottom line where it says where they trust the audience. And you think to yourself, how could that be? How could a physician in Philadelphia dial up somebody in Saskatoon who he's never seen or talked to and then trust that information that that individual gives them? And this comes out, this is part of the legacy of the pandemic, when everyone began to reach out to anybody they could think of to figure out the protocol, to figure out the medication, to deny Trump's bleach idea. But it also led to this great democratization of medical knowledge, that nobody knew what to do. There was no standard of care. There was no medication. So there was a scramble. And the scramble led in many different directions, which led to this credibility thing, that somebody in Saskatoon might have an idea that would work in New Jersey, that somebody in New Jersey might have an idea that would work in Atlanta, that some hospital in Texas figured out a way to treat COVID-19 a little faster and a little better than everybody else, and this was shared broadly. So this has been the underpinnings of this trust factor that physicians grant social platforms. Now, this is a chart that shows a variety of different ways that social media is used. And the key point I want to make here is twofold. Number one, that each platform has its own rules, each platform has its own sensibilities, each platform can be used in different ways, and increasingly each platform can be HCPs can be targeted in a little different way. Facebook continues to be the big dog, although they've dumbed down the ability to target using a variety of discrete data points. As a result, your best option with Facebook and some of the others is an MPI-based list match to try and find the HCPs you want to talk to. On the flip side, LinkedIn is ascendant in this space because they have the best targeting opportunities, because they have the most data points that indicate all the specifics of HCP behavior, and you can find people by specialty, you can find people by geography, you can find people by their degrees. The other thing that's interesting is different specialties favor different platforms. I'm not exactly sure why endocrinologists are crazy about TikTok, although I'm guessing it has something to do with the obesity epidemic and the growth of GLP-1 medications. This is an area where we continue to do survey work to find out why is it that these particular platforms are favored by these particular specialties. The other thing that's interesting is that different platforms return different kinds of behaviors. I know this is kind of an eye chart, but really what it tells you is there is a desire to post, to find, and to follow fellow HCPs, and also there is an opportunity in many cases to influence behavior. I think Jim showed a slide which showed a high percentage of HCPs influenced by social media, and this data was confirmed in a number of surveys we've done at LiveWorld in tandem with Sermo. The other thing that's interesting is that there are secondary sources which are becoming very important. Instagram is growing in popularity. YouTube is a repository of many MOA videos and a lot of procedural videos. TikTok and Snapchat are growing, and WhatsApp has become the international standard. So not only do you reach out to Saskatoon, you can reach out to London, Paris, and Rome and get HCP talking to HCP. The idea behind this, of course, is that peer-to-peer conversation, peer-to-peer sharing, peer-to-peer credibility is driving all this. And if you've ever been to a dinner meeting where non-competitive physicians talk with each other, you can see the excitement, you can see the electricity, you can see the sharing that this peer-to-peer understanding is called for. And this is really the driving dynamic behind a lot of the social media usage. The other thing that's interesting is that in spite of the fact that Elon Musk continues to mess with what we used to call Twitter and now we call X, that this was previously the place for public and private HCP groups, journal clubs, clubs by specialty, alumni organizations, book clubs, all exist on Twitter. They continue to exist on X, mostly out of inertia. A few have migrated to LinkedIn, but still many of these HCPs have many followers. I think of Dr. Khan, who has 157,000 cardiologists. I think of Dr. Kevin, MD, Dr. Mike, and my favorite, of course, is Z-Dog MD, the wild prophet of the airwaves, who has 1 million followers on X. So they're there, they're attentive, they believe in it, they're sticking with it because it adds value and it's predictable. So key takeaways for the public use of social media. It exists in a professional content. You want to use each site differently, and you want to leverage the idea of influencers. Now we come to my favorite area, the idea of walled gardens. You heard a little bit from Jim at Sermo. These are protected spaces accessed by NPI numbers. They're private. In our case, we have a medical director that's become an activist and joined all of them. The good news is they compete with each other like crazy. So as a result, there's constant innovation. There's constant movement. Excuse me. There's constant movement to improve the experience. So as Jim pointed out, there are case challenges, there are polls, there are studies, there are opportunities to advertise, there are video segments, there are interactive and engaging tools, all of which are maintained by these platforms. But they are private, they are effective, they get high engagement, they get high usage. You can trust the information that's there, it's verified. And the other thing is, you understand, of course, that they're highly competitive, so they're constantly trying to one-up each other. The other is there are a variety of different advertising opportunities at different shapes and sizes and tool sets to interact with HCPs. And the other thing you want to understand is, of course, that the feeds are generally based on specialty. So in some cases, there are wild, robust, exciting feeds. In other cases, there are crickets. So you need to understand which specialty you want to reach. You need to understand what content you want to put on Sermo or Doximity or GMed or Skipta or Medscape. So there's a lot of opportunities to engage in these walled gardens. And again, the walled gardens, we've listed the top two, have two important business impacts. Number one, they are good at changing perception of medication or treatment. Physicians encountering data in the walled gardens tend to believe them, and because they believe them, a healthy percentage change their prescribing habits. So for those of you that are tasked and measured on increased scripts, these are opportunities to move the needle. These are opportunities to grease the pipeline. These are opportunities to reach HCPs in their favorite protected private space. Now, adjacent to this is this idea of digital opinion leaders. And if you really want to make your MLR teams crazy, march in and announce you're going to do DOLs tomorrow without warning them, without involving them. DOLs are different, and this is part of this democratization of medical knowledge. DOLs are independent brands who are driven mostly by knowledge and ego of the individuals. These are not people that are going to read the pre-approved slide deck at the dinner meeting. These are people that have their own opinions, people that have their own brands, people that post regularly, people that are generally skeptical of big pharma, and people that have credibility and have attracted large numbers of fellow HCPs to their sites. So the idea, of course, is you want to co-create with these people. In our case, what we do is we start with MLR by telling them what we want to do and where a DOL fits in the overall omnichannel strategy. The question, of course, is what do you want them to do, when do you want them to do it, and how does their role fit in among the other tactics that you are taking to bring your products to market. As you might imagine, The factors affecting their perspective are psychodemographics, who they are, where they went to school, how old they are, how many years they've been in practice. All these inform their point of view, and all these involve how they craft their content and how they're going to respond to you. And as a result, you want to think about likely influencer topics. And this is part of this omnichannel strategy idea. Do you want them a one-time email? Do you want them to participate in a webinar? Do you want them to show up at a congress? Do you want them to post a video? And if so, how does that fit into your overall strategy? We have worked with DOLs doing almost all the content pieces listed on this slide. But again, no one has taken over a DOL as a total spokesperson for the brand. We've seen a lot of these programs stymied by MLR. We've seen a lot of these programs that have disintegrated because of disagreements about the content. So you're not buying space on somebody's ad platform. You're co-creating with somebody who has an independent opinion, who's looking to build their own brand, who's conscious of their role and how they might be perceived by other HCPs. So it's a different set of factors you need to consider. And some of these people are represented by really sharp lawyers that want very tight contracts and want very tight specifications of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, and how they're subject to review. The other thing you need to think about is in some cases you need to monitor and moderate a DOL's feed, because when they're not talking about your product, when they're not talking about your brand, they're talking about other stuff which could create liability for you or associate your brand with other things that you don't want to be associated with. So who follows influencers? This is from one of the Sermo data surveys. You can see, of course, that dermatologists tend to be the primary following specialty. We suspect that's because not only do they have a variety of conditions that they cover, but also because many of them have independently sell products to their patients. You also see that gastros, and you'll see in a minute, gastros tend to be the no guys. Gastros, we don't exactly know why, but tend to deny any influence. So here are the stats that Jim presented, and again, which is 67% tell us in surveys that information they gleaned in social media changed their perception of a medication, and also another high percentage changed their prescribing behavior based on information they found in social media. So there's access, there's credibility, there's reach, there's innovation, and there's sharing, all involved in the social media equation, which are being factored in by HCPs who are using this, and I'll say this again, who are using this as part of their clinical tool set. We expect that this not only will continue, but this will grow as we move forward and as social media morphs. There are new platforms coming online. If you want to make your med legal people crazy, mention Reddit. None of them ever heard of it, and they're scared to death of it. But also Dispatch, and there's a variety of others. I think somebody mentioned WeChat as well, are platforms that are coming online. So you've got innovation, somebody said this morning, you've got creativity among the medical people. We're seeing that in the use and the use and the practice of social media. So changing perceptions, again, gastros are deniers, dermatologists, PCPs are more prone to changing their point of view and changing their behavior. Again, gastros are the no guys. So there's proof that social media moves the needle. Social media can be leveraged by your brands. Social media can be an important tool in an omnichannel strategy to move the needle to meet your KPIs. So, takeaways. You want to look at the different platforms for their individual values and their individual sensibilities. You want to speak the language of HCPs. You want to adapt your message to the platform to connect in the strongest possible way with HCPs. So a few recommendations. Number one, you want to plan for both public and private social media as part of an omnichannel strategy. Number two, you want to focus on specialty. Number three, you want short, dedicated, snackable, and shareable video. Video is becoming the key medium in social media. HCPs appreciate it, HCPs want it. And remember, you're not going to tell the whole story in a short video. You're going to kick open the door, you're going to introduce an idea, and you're going to build a connection. You want to the other thing that we think about and we're beginning to see is the involvement of MSLs. We're breaking down the walls between commercial and marketing and MSLs. In our case, we send our medical people to join these groups, to participate in private groups, in public groups, in walled gardens, so we know what's going on, so we have an opportunity to contribute to the conversation. We also have an opportunity to understand the dynamics of what's going on in these groups, which will allow us to make smarter media decisions and smarter content choices. You want to involve your legal teams early on in DSL. And lastly, you want to monitor and moderate anything you're doing in social media to be sure you're compliant and to be sure that you continue to maintain the safety of the platforms that we're using. So hopefully I've left you with the idea that social media is part and parcel of this HCP toolkit, that it's beginning strong, it's going to get stronger, it's going to be more important, and that you should factor it in your omnichannel strategies and omnichannel programs. With that, naturally, a quick plug. If you need help with this, LiveWorld, which is our agency, is dedicated to unlocking social, and we can help you in whatever way makes sense. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Danny. Any quick questions? Yes, before we move on, Luzine?
Thank you for that. Just a quick question. I was a little surprised to see that Facebook is one of the primary platforms for HCPs, because the only person that I know that still actively uses Facebook is my mom. So I'm curious, is it HCP to HCP conversations, or is it HCP to patient
It's
conversations?
HCP to HCP conversations. There's a variety of public and private groups on Facebook. Facebook's functionality favors the group thing. You can't advertise into groups, so they're in some ways protected. But you can message people in the groups by doing a list match.
Right, but they're closed groups though, so you can't really see.
Well, there are both, as I say, there are both some public and some private groups. The majority are private.
Right. Thank you.